Hypixel Skyblock is a game entirely focused around the grind. From skills to slayers to catacombs, everything is grindy in this game, but there are some players that take that to the extreme. These are the players at the top of Hypixel Skyblock's most difficult leaderboards, and while many of these players are cheaters, there are a select few who are legitimate players who just grind a lot. You've probably heard of some of these players. Many of them are also content creators or are just well known in the community, but there are a select few who are very much unknown. One of such players goes by the name of Demon Hunter 990. He's a pretty quiet guy and keeps to himself most of the time, but recently he lost his #1 fishing XP position to something pretty ridiculous. A few days ago, Demon Hunter's profile was deleted, and no, it was not by his own doing, which is why in today's video I will be telling you the untold story of Hypixel Skyblock's craziest fisherman. Demon Hunter started playing Hypixel Skyblock in May of 2020, and like many other players was sort of just looking for something to do to occupy his time because of the mess that was May of 2020. Demon had never really played much Hypixel before this, and his only guides to the game mode were Technoblade's old Skyblock videos. Despite what you might think, he wasn't immediately drawn to fishing. His first experiences with fishing were actually pretty bad, largely because he didn't know what particles were. As he grinded up his skills, he was never really much of a talkative person. He kept to himself most of the time, and for the months that I knew him when I shared a guild with him, he was pretty reserved. He ended up grinding out most of his skills to level 20, which did in fact include fishing, and he did all of that without ever learning that particles were a thing, meaning that he fished all the way up until level 20 just based off the sound of the bobber going up and down. If that doesn't give you a good reference frame for how crazy this guy is, I really don't know what will. He also ended up doing most of his fishing here at the Fisherman's Pond, which is actually worse than doing it anywhere else. This is arguably the worst place in the game to fish because a lot of the things that you catch are clay and not regular fishing drops, meaning that you get heavily nerfed fishing XP. From there, he stopped fishing at the Fisherman's Hut and began fishing here in the park. And while that isn't that bad in theory, it's almost worse for fishing XP than the Fisherman's Hut, giving him only about 50,000 fishing XP per hour. He ended up doing this all the way from fishing 21 to around fishing 28, which would have taken him over 100 hours. On top of that, he did that all without rain unless somebody else bought it for him. He always thought he would be too poor for it, despite the fact that it actually makes more money than not using rain. Obviously, Demon wasn't super familiar with the game itself. The real cherry on the cake for Demon Hunter's extremely peculiar playthrough of the game was that it was upwards of fishing 20 when he realized that he hadn't hit farming level 7, meaning that he hadn't unlocked the bazaar. Even after he unlocked the bazaar, he never even really used it. He always sort of felt like he was too poor to use it, despite the fact that he did have a decent bit of money. By this point, Demon had long since decided that fishing was the part of the game he enjoyed the most. However, he was still very early into the gear progression. Up until this point, he was pretty much a non in multiple ways. He only really had angler armor, a winter rod, and no pet, and he also never used bait. He was also a default rank on the Hypixel network, which we'll get back to in a little bit. As he grinded up the levels, he enjoyed the competitive aspect of it, and although he never shared his fishing XP goals, or ever really flexed his levels, he always sort of saw it as a challenge to reach those who did. At this point, he began to get better gear and more money just from the fact that he was playing so much. He had diver armor, a legendary flying fish, an epic squid, and a shredder, and so he was pretty set with some decent gear. Around fishing 42, he stopped fishing in the park and began exclusively fishing in the Spider's Den. He began climbing up the ranks relatively quickly, from 400 to 300 to 200, and peaked nearly at 100 when Marina came out. Of course, the fact that he was relatively quiet and reserved meant that not a ton of people knew about him, but another thing to add on to that was all the way through this point, he remained a default rank on the Hypixel network, and even till this day he is. He was strongly against the idea of him buying a rank, not because he didn't want to support the server, but because there was just so much hate against nons and defaults in the community. At this point, he realized that he could reach #1. He was climbing the ranks quickly, and he thought to himself that it would be really funny if he were the #1 fishing XP player as a default. He ended up meeting and racing to different goals with a number of players, but an important thing to note before we move on is that Demon all the way through this point still had never used bait. He also never barn fished, and only fished in the spider's den, never even buying rain when he fished in the park. He was a very strange player. All the way through fishing 50, Demon had a few rules for himself, the first of which was that he couldn't craft bait, the second of which was that he couldn't buy bait, and the third of which was that all of the fish that he collected would be going into fish minions and buying the whale pet. He did this only because it made his challenge more difficult, and despite that, he still made it all the way up until fishing 50. After he hit fishing 50, he sort of just kept on going. He would play for upwards of 10 or 12 hours a day sometimes, saying that at his peak, he was fishing upwards of 18 hours a day. Around this time, he was 40th in fishing XP, which quickly became 30th, then 20th, then 10th. He quickly realized that achieving first place was very doable. The first place player at the time for him was a player that you've probably heard the name of, Young Gravy. Despite the fact that the way Young fished was 50 to 60% more efficient than the way Demon fished, Demon quickly passed his ranking just on the fact that he was grinding for upwards of 18 hours a day.
Hey, Sir Deadly!
Around this point was also when I met Demon for the first time. Demon and I were in a guild together called First Place Fishing, which I joined because I also enjoyed fishing. Young was and still is the guild master of the guild that I am currently in, which is called Fishy Cult. Leading up to and ever since that pass happened, there's been an intense rivalry between First Place Fishing and Fishy Cult, being the top two placed fishing-centered guilds in the game. At the time of the pass, Demon and Young both had around 150 to 160 million fishing XP. However, this didn't satisfy Demon. Before I go on to tell you the end of Demon's story, I feel like I should tell you a little bit about the way he fishes. Demon wasn't really the cast a rod, catch a sea creature, throw the rod out and kill it midair sort of guy. He was more the cast a rod out, catch a sea creature, throw it behind you, turn around, overshoot by 30 degrees, turn back, and then cast again before turning back around to start over. If it isn't painfully obvious by the way I just described it, that way of fishing is extremely slow, and despite that, he still reached the highest fishing XP by a mile. Despite all of that, he made it upwards of 500 million fishing XP up until somewhat recently. His only competition was a player by the name of 7R7, and they were second place and still nearly 100 million fishing XP behind. However, that all ended somewhat recently. On June 30th, 2021, Demon's account was compromised and somebody hacked in and, as far as we know, deleted his main profile. His main profile just simply doesn't exist anymore. Through all of this, we don't know why or how or who did it, but somebody compromised his account, went on, deleted his main profile, and then got banned, likely for security reasons. Through all of this, we still have no idea who did this or why they would want to. Demon has been a pretty reserved person through all of his time playing the game, and has made basically no enemies. These days, many people know of Demon, but still, very few people really know Demon. The reason I'm making this video is not just to share his pretty incredible story, but also to hopefully gain some insight into what happened. If you have any idea who or what did this, please do reach out to me on Discord and tell me as much as you know. I know that this is a very different style and tone of video from what I normally make, so if you enjoy this and you want to see more of this kind of content, it would really mean a lot if you went down and commented your support and joined my Discord server to tell me more. While you're down there, you might as well like the video and subscribe to my channel as well, as it really does encourage me to make more content for you guys. If you want to see more videos like this, I'll link a playlist in a card now where you can watch all of my Hypixel Skyblock videos. With that, I'll see you guys later, and adios.